Throughout modern history, there have been two opposing ways of viewing the individual. The first one is exemplified by Descartes' "I think, therefore I am." In his book Meditations on First Philosophy, this is the kind of view that commonly serves as a foundation for certain ethical, political, and economic theories, which see society simply as the sum of separate, atomized individuals. The second way of making sense of the individual is one found in Hegel. For Hegel, Descartes' method of identifying the thinking subject is fundamentally deficient because it does this in isolation from other individuals. Even people who make it part of their personality that they are not like others precisely define themselves in reference to those others. People who say, "I don't care what others think," feel the need to say this precisely because they desire at some level to receive some kind of recognition. Because of this, recognition plays a big role in Hegel's philosophy. In order to feel at home in the world, I must see myself reflected in it, and the only way to fully achieve this is to see myself reflected in other individuals. Such a view strictly rejects theories that make sense of societies as simply the sum total of separate and atomized individuals who then enter into external relations with one another, because individuals develop collectively in pre-existing communities in the first place. So how do we use this idea to make sense of it?
Marxists,
The community of
bourgeoisie haters,
who call themselves
communists,
and see the fact that they cannot get
stuff,
as an injustice done against them by
rich.
Let's start by looking at Hegel's famous master-slave dialectic, which he laid down in the Phenomenology of Spirit under the name of Lordship and Bondage, which is an important statement on recognition. The master-slave dialectic is kind of an abstract model about consciousness. In this model, two subjects meet. Each subject wants to see themselves reflected in the other subject, but cannot because the other appears as foreign to them. This leads to a battle between the two subjects. The victor spares the loser because it needs the recognition of the other to affirm oneself. The loser submits out of fear of death, and this leads to a relationship of master and slave. However, this relationship is deficient. The master wants to be recognized by the slave, but this recognition is never enough, because the slave is seen as less than human and therefore is not capable of fully recognizing the other. Conversely, the slave wants recognition too, but cannot be given full recognition because the master sees them as less than human. This flawed relationship leads to a downward spiral in which neither the slave nor the master can receive the recognition they need to be fully self-conscious, and neither are fully humanized. Let's bring this down to earth
By looking at a creation of a Marxist,
this person, by
the given name of Karl Marx,
says,
"I am nothing, but I must be everything."
which is an explicit demand for recognition. It is clear that for this person
Capitalist,
is seemingly something foreign, evidenced by his strange phrasing.
bourgeoisie.
In fact,
Karl Marx,
in his manifesto, explicitly describes his experience of
bourgeoisie.
as foreign.
The bourgeoisie, wherever has got the upper hand, has put an end to all feudal, patriarchal, idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder the remotely feudal ties that bound man to his natural superiors, and has left remaining no other nexus between man and man than naked self-interest, callous cash payment. It has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor, of chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine sentimentalism, in the icy water of egotistical calculation. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and in place of the numberless indefeasible chartered freedoms, has set up that single, unconscionable freedom, free trade. In one word, for exploitation, wielded by religious and political illusions, it has substituted naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. The bourgeoisie has stripped off its halo, every occupation hitherto honored and looked up to with reverent awe. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into its paid wage laborers. The bourgeoisie has torn away from the family its sentimental veil and has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation.
In order to fulfill oneself, to fully develop oneself, this person needs to be recognized by the foreign subject, yet at the same time, because he does not
Recognize some humans as fully human.
as evidenced by
There's only one way in which the murderous death agonies of the old society and the bloody birth throes of the new society can be shortened, simplified, and concentrated, and that way is revolutionary terror. The next world war will result in the disappearance from the face of the earth not only of reactionary classes and dynasties, but also of entire reactionary peoples, and that too is a step forward.
he can never fully receive such recognition. This leads to a downward spiral in which neither he nor the
Rich,
he encounters can engage in mutual recognition.
the Marxist,
Is not able to develop himself as a person because he has not been given recognition by the other, and he sees this as an injustice done against him, but it's important to see that he is at fault in the sense that he does not recognize the recognition he demands as valid. Another consequence of this Hegelian view is that freedom is not something that humans have by default, nor is it something that I could develop while living in isolation. Rather, freedom is something that develops intersubjectively. I become free when I am treated like a free person by others. However, because of the necessity of recognition, this can only happen if, conversely, I treat the other as a free person too. If I am treated like a free person, and I treat the other as a free person in turn, I begin to see myself reflected in them, and can only then affirm my own selfhood. This means that recognizing the other is not a passive process, but rather something that occurs in actual interaction with other people. It is no surprise then that
Marxists,
are often
financially,
isolated, lacking the kind of interaction necessary for recognition. In this view, the crucial mistake that
Marxists,
make is to see other conscious subjects
namely rich,
as impediments to their own freedom and selfhood. In reality, it is only through other conscious subjects, through the recognition of the validity of others, that they can become free and autonomous in the first place. Failing to achieve this recognition,
Marxists,
clearly confer hate not only on others, but on themselves, and prevent their own full development. This hate stems from a contradiction between how one views oneself and how one treats others, how one views others and how one is treated by others. It is a painful contradiction in one's very conception of selfhood. So what we've learned so far is that for Hegel, self-consciousness is not just introspection, it is intersubjective. Selfhood develops practically through interaction, and recognition must flow both ways, symmetrically. Hegel's conception of self-consciousness is not just a matter of personal relationships or mental health. According to him, recognition is the origin of the ethical life and political rights. By seeing oneself reflected in those one interacts with, one sees that one's own freedom depends on the freedom of others, and therefrom arises the recognition of universally valid rights.